Well, here we are at the end of lockdown. We're looking forward to getting our freedom. But sometimes during lockdown, it can be a difficult time, and we all handle it in different ways. I know that at times it was a bit of a struggle for you. What was that about?
I think it's because I'm such a initiator and I plan, and a lot of my plans I would just watch on the calendar as they all dropped off. And even now we're supposed to be in Darwin ministering to some missionaries, but we couldn't go. And so after a while, I just stopped planning.
Oh, okay. So was it sort of like there was nothing to look forward to, or?
It was like well, they call it languishing. I was languishing. I just had no motivation, even to do stuff around here. And even my work, it's like I was so low in motivation for so long because there didn't seem any point to anything.
Because as soon as you would put something in place, we'd get another restriction and we couldn't pull it off. I get that a little bit, yeah.
So I've been challenged to... There was a guy that wrote a book, and I'm trying to think of his name, but it was called Practicing the Presence of God. And even while he was just doing the dishes, he would practice the presence of God. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've been thinking about the times when I have been in a difficult situation, and God has really come through for me, and I've practiced the presence of God.
Yeah. And what, have you experienced that in the lockdown?
Yeah, I have, but there's one that comes to mind quite a few years ago now that was really significant. I was working in Uganda, and I was on my own that time. I was living there teaching.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, teaching at the university. And Vivian, my Ugandan friend, and I decided that we'd go on a retreat because we were pretty spent. And we were on the banks of the Nile, and it was 2 hours from civilization, really. And, every bug known to humankind was there. And I was a little bit scared of malaria and, all sorts of things.
So what happened at night when you put the light on?
Oh, I would read with it. We didn't have iPads in those days, but with a torch, and I would look up, and my net would just be absolutely black with bugs. And I'm thinking, you stay out there and not in here. But one particular night I went to bed and I felt really, languishing. I felt a real malaise, and I thought that I was getting malaria. And I lay down on the pillow and started to go to sleep, and I said to God, well, I'm a long way from help. If I am getting sick, you're going to have to take care of me. And as clear as anything, he said to me in my heart, it's not a physical sickness, it's an emotional one. And I was feeling pretty low. And while we were there, they were having a retreat. There wasn't anything to do with us. It was called the Father's Heart. And so we looked at each other, Vivian and I, and said, well, we may as well go. And we went and sat in on it, and it was really annoying because it was very didactic, and I thought, what am I doing here?
It's not normally your style, is it?
No. And they gave us this innocuous handout, and we both went into different parts of the garden. The garden was absolutely beautiful, and there was a trampoline there, so I sat on the trampoline and I just started going through this handout, and it would have what you were struggling with and then a Bible verse. And I forget even what I listed that I was struggling with. But I read the Bible verse, and it was about Jacob, where God gave him a new name. And in that moment, God met me. Because the northern Ugandan people, the Acholi, had given me a name called Neomungu. And we would laugh about it, and it meant daughter of God, daughter sent from God. But in that moment, God said to me, as clear as anything, I gave you that name, not the Acholis. Yeah. And I felt so seen and so loved, and the tears came, and I think my sense of God and who he was to me just changed so much in that moment.
Yeah, I can remember when you came back, and it was as if whoever went over there did not come back. And I knew that something had happened. When you tell it like that, I wish that I'd have been there.
Well, Vivian was over here, and I looked up at her, and she's coming towards me, and she's got tears rolling down her face because God had met her too. It was just a remarkable, in the middle of nowhere, just this remarkable encounter with God.
The God intervention.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And is that what you're sort of relating to languishing?
Yeah, in the middle of feeling down and feeling like, what am I doing here? Am I really making any difference? All this sort of thing. God just met me. And, I know I was in a place where he could meet me. And perhaps that's a key too. But he really met me. I'm wondering what yours are, because you've had some significant moments where God has met you as well.
Oh, you know that over my journey as a believer, I've been one of God's demanding children. The demand has been basically along the lines that he should make things good for me.
Oh, I've felt that too. Yeah, God and I are one.
Yeah. Well, you have claimed that place every now and again. So the way that worked out, I was the measure of what was good for me. And I, we joke about it, but I have struggled with that. It's been, for me to trust God in difficult places has not been an easy journey for me. And the time that I'm remembering is when we were up in the north of Sri Lanka, in Kilinoshi, and we caught up with some couples and some people that we had been ministering with in the past, and some of them were blind, and we just had a lovely connection with them. Even as I'm talking, I can see their faces and my heart is warm.
And you know what I remember? The little chooks in the garden and the chameleons, and just the lovely setting, and just watching it all happen, and it just, red dirt, but this beautiful garden.
Yeah, and it was just we were just meeting for lunch, and we were going to have a little bit of a presentation, and I was just looking forward to it. The atmosphere was just relaxing, and even though we couldn't speak the same language, the communication was rich, and I just felt alive there, and it was just really enjoyable. And so we sat down in the afternoon after lunch to just do a bit of a presentation, which is always dangerous after lunch because it can be difficult. So I'm just sitting there with you, and these lovely people gave us some gifts of some herb and spicy type necklaces, and they just put them on us, and they were talking in their language, and Robert was translating roughly. And all of a sudden, out of the audience, this young girl comes and she begins to dance in front of us. And Robert just sidles over and says, "Oh, that's a dance in honour of you two." And I thought, oh, wow, it was hot. And the poor little thing, I was wanting to get up and say, "You don't have to do it anymore." But she danced away, and it was a beautiful thing. It was a gift. And then after she had done her dance, Robert got us to stand up in front of them, and they're all beaming at us, and we're smiling and connecting with them. And then all of a sudden their leader comes out, and he begins to do some sort of...
Now you've got me crying. I remember it well.
Yeah. And what they did is they, in Robert's words, it was a very honouring ceremony. They put a robe over each one of us, and they said, "As far as we are concerned, you are now part of us, and whenever you come back here, we are your family, you are in our community. We thank you for your involvement with us." And I mean, yeah, you're crying, and I'm close to it now as well. And I can remember I was crying, and I sat down, and it was like it crashed through to me. All of my life made sense in that one moment.
All of our pain, our couple pain and our family pain and my background pain, all of those things made sense in that moment, didn't they?
Yeah.
And perhaps it was all because of those people.
It was okay. And I just felt, tangibly the goodness of God. I was his and he was mine. And he was smiling as I just looked back and thought, it just makes sense. And I remember that saying in Africa when they would greet us, God is good. And the response was, all the time. And if someone had said that to me then, I would have said, all the time.
Oh, that's a lovely memory. I didn't know you were going to bring that one up. That really fills me with a lot of warmth. I have a current one too, because I was cleaning up our attic in lockdown, as you do, as everybody's been doing, sorting things out and cleaning up. And I wanted to get rid of my old filing cabinet. And so I had kept a whole lot of stuff that people had written to us in thank you over the years of the impact that we'd had in their lives. And I had kept it in case I ever got really discouraged and I'd read it and perhaps it would encourage me. But this was a clean out. So I've got this huge box of stuff and I start reading it all. And it really was incredibly encouraging. Just the impact that I and we had on so many lives over the years. But there was another point to it, is that I'd kept all my daughter's letters and all her cards to me over the years. And, as I read them, I could see her love coming through for me in quite profound ways that I had entirely missed. Because we had a difficult relationship during her teenage years, it's almost like I was keeping a part of me protected in case something went wrong. And I could see her, not only her love, but she saw me. And so it was quite profound for me. In that moment, God just opened my eyes to that. And he opened my eyes to my lack of love and my kind of hiddenness, if you like. Anyway, I went back to her and I asked her forgiveness for that, and that was a very freeing thing for me, and I loved the conversation that we had, and I've felt so different since then.
Wow.
So God has met me in the most unusual ways. You couldn't even orchestrate it.
That's lovely, and I see the difference there. And I can remember reading some of those things that had been written, and the insight, the way that she had seen you, and others as well, was quite staggering. And I'm sure it was arresting your attention there.
It was. It's still reverberating around in me. I actually took photos of it all, and our daughter suggested that I kind of make some wallpaper of it, so that our granddaughter can read through them. And I thought that was a lovely idea.
It's interesting what you were saying. You hadn't seen it before, and all of a sudden you saw it.
I did.
It reminds me of the first chapter of Ephesians, where Paul prays that that God will give the Ephesians the spirit of wisdom and revelation. And that idea of revelation is communicating the knowledge of God to the heart, to the soul. It just opens things. And it reminds me of a time when we were in Uganda, and we'd had some really lovely ministry over there with missionary couples, and the place we were staying in was delightful. And I love Africa, and we were making new friends. It was just amazing.
We're in Kenya, weren't we? Yeah.
And you shared a blog with me, a Ruth Haley Barton blog. And I'd been messing around in the first chapter of Ephesians quite a bit. And she just made one statement, that our calling is connected to our identity. And that identity is the reality that we are sons and daughters of God. So it's that spirit of wisdom and revelation. I read that stuff. maybe 1,000 times.
In 1,000 different ways.
Yeah,
But something about that, I knew something about that really resonated with you.
Yeah, it was like up in Kilinoshi, it all began to make sense. And it wasn't just knowledge or information, it was reality. And I was just in another space. And of course we went off to Uganda and things didn't turn out so well. It was as if our enemy was saying, well, I'm not going to leave you in that space. But it did, because that premise was tested in Uganda, and I was dismally disappointed. And I know that when I came back here, I went to God and I said, I don't know what's happening. I'm your son, and I don't know what's happening. How can this happen? And again, the Spirit of God led me into Ephesians, and it was just like a feast.
I know you've been talking about it ever since. And that was 2 years ago.
I'll be looking. I'm going back into it time and time again.
How has it changed you?
Confidence is not the right word, but it's something like that. I'm not who I was. I am who I am, and that I am part is I am blessed. I'm chosen. I'm adopted by God, and it seems as if I'm living into that truth, and it's not just information anymore. It's becoming more of a reality. And so when I get into a difficult situation, I remind myself, remember who you are.
So you don't, and you're so good at making things happen also in your own strength. And I noticed that has changed a lot.
In what
There's
way?
more of a lightness in you, more of a carrying things lightly.
Yeah. Remember, when I came back, I went to the counsellor, my friend, and asked him, why am I overly responsible? And that was part of it, because I was carrying things that I wasn't meant to carry, and controlling things that I wasn't meant to control. And I'm glad that you can see a difference there. I feel it, and it's just one of those encounters that I will value and remember for the rest of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. It's actually been lovely to talk about these experiences, because we have been through a difficult time, and there'll be many more difficult times to come. And I hope you're challenged in some way to practice the presence of God and put yourself in the place where He can actually speak to you. What did you say? Knowledge and revelation?
So, Paul prays that we might have the spirit of wisdom and revelation.
So thank you for listening.
It's worth praying every day.
Yeah. Thank you.